Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching.
Good afternoon, everyone, both here to our live audience as well as to those of you that are joining us by live stream. It's a real pleasure to have you join us. I'm Tom Schreier, and I have the true privilege of being the founding director of the Inspired Leadership Initiative here at the University of Notre Dame. It is our program where people come to discover, discern, and design the next stage of their lives. And they do that during the course of an academic year, and it's really been a true privilege to be engaged with this over the course of the last 5 to 6 years. And I want to also thank all of you, both those of you that are here in person, as well as those joining us for joining us during this installment of the Creating Your Inspired Journey speaker series. Before we start, I want to thank those that really helped to make this possible through lending their talents and their time to making all of this come together. First of all, the Alumni Association and our co-sponsors who, along with the Inspired Leadership Initiative, bring this to life, and that's Young ND, the Notre Dame Senior Alumni, Notre Dame Women Connect, and the Mendoza College of Business. So true gratitude to all of you for helping us make this happen. Just a quick technical note before we get started. Later in the program, we will have a question and answer session. And those of you that are live here, I'm just going to ask you to wait for the mic to come to you so that those who are on live stream can hear your question. And for those of you that are on live stream, you can see in the event description part of YouTube, a Google form where you can enter your question, and your questions will be brought up to Chris and I. So our guest today is Chris Farrell, someone who I've had the great pleasure of getting to know over the course of a number of years, a journalist, author, speaker, really whose writing in journalism was rooted in finance and personal finance and economics, but has really done a nice migration to also bring into context things which we talk about a lot in the Inspired Leadership Initiative, which is, how do you make a pivot? Whether you're at the stage that the fellows we have here at, or earlier in life. And I think you've just done a wonderful and marvelous job, and I really look forward to our conversation today. I think it's going to be a ton of fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure. So let me just start with a few questions, and hopefully this turns into a conversation.
Yes, absolutely. I have some questions for you. So.
Oh, okay. I will tell you, let me just start by saying it's a little intimidating to interview a reporter. But also great fun. And it's been a great joy being with you over the course of the last bit of time here. So the first thing is, what really catalyzed your interest in this space, which resulted in a number of books that you've authored, like Purpose in a Paycheck, Unretirement, and The New Frugality. What catalyzed that interest for you?
So if you think my journalism career has sort of two strands, and one is economics.
Right.
And if you think about an economic story over the past 3 decades, it's been about the dire demographics of aging, that the baby boom population was getting older. Much of the world economies, Europe and Asia, are getting older. And this was just going to undermine the dynamism of the economy. And then the other strand is personal finance. And of course, there the story has been people are not prepared for the retirement. The standard of living is going to fall. And it was nothing more sophisticated than a rebellion against this sort of negative story. And so I started doing some research, and I was finding all this fascinating scattered economic studies, much of it coming out of Europe, but some out of places here in the US, and sort of looking at aging through a different lens, and about how many people, as they get older, become more creative. If you think about many artists in their 50s, they're more creative than they were in their 40s. And then in their 60s, they're more creative than they were in their 50s. And then you start thinking about a lot of the professions, and you find out the same thing is going on. And so I just became really absorbed with this. And then on the sort of personal finance side, it really is, the personal finances are working longer, just 1 or 2 years longer, to how people are going to fare. It's enormous. So that's how I got started. And then you start out and you go out and talk to people, and you find all these stories. And what I ended up realizing is that this is a grassroots movement that's going on, and it's going on all over the country.
And have you found that there are a couple of kind of key tenets or lessons that have emerged from all of the different conversations that you've had from working on doing your writing and other things?
So there's a couple things. I think one is to really fight against the stereotypes about aging. I mean, there is this story out there that, your creativity, it ends when you're 50. And, other stories are that, if we got a problem, you're reliable, but, we're not going to call you into the room in order to help solve this problem. So one of the things really is we're a better educated society. Overall, we're a healthier society. The world has changed in many ways where physical labor is less of a component of much of work. And so there are really opportunities that are being opened up. So it's to think about opportunities that go with an aging population and their experience and their knowledge, rather than putting this lens of things are going to be really bad. And one of the things I've become absolutely convinced, I don't know if this is your experience, but in casual conversations with people, there's kind of this notion that you go from 60 to 90 in 1 year. And the thing is, it actually takes 30 years to go from 60 to 90.
Yeah, no, it's an experience that I think we both shared, right? That there is this sense that you reach this age, right, which was kind of codified 40 or 50 years ago by the Social Security Administration, that you're kind of done. But you really now have an extended period of time. And, for most people, given the way the world is today, relative to then, it was easy to say 60 back then because the life expectancy was 2 to 5 years after that. Today, it's much longer, and people are also feeling better, right? So this 60 to 90 doesn't really work so well for people anymore, right? I mean,
it doesn't.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really, I think you mentioned, what I think is really important. One of the things I think is really important is the rise of entrepreneurship in the 50 plus population. And, this is a real shift in my profession, because back in the 1990s, if we wrote a story about entrepreneurship, we would say you don't want to be an entrepreneur later in life. It's too risky. But what's happened, and if you look at the Kaufman Foundation, their data, it's about a quarter of all new entrepreneurs in recent years. COVID puts a little bit of a quirk in this, but still, it's true, is the 55 to 64-year-old age group. And that's up from about 15% in 1997. When you look at self-employment, the solo entrepreneur, it increases with age. The proportion of the workforce that's working full-time that is self-employed. And a lot of it reflects the changes in our society. Technology has made it a lot cheaper to start a business. It's not like you're going to go buy a brick and mortar building, but your home or your apartment or a co-sharing workspace, that's your office. And you're selling your skills, your knowledge, your experience. And it's a really exciting aspect. And it also is, maybe you don't make that much money, but the fact is you're making some money. And it's a very creative enterprise. Starting a business, running a business, a social enterprise, it's a creative endeavor.
So do you see that the businesses that are generated, or the enterprises that generated, have a more social element to them, social entrepreneur kind of element to them at that stage in life, and where people are thinking about, I want to have an impact beyond making money? Do you see an intersection there? And maybe that even brings to mind the whole idea of purpose in this stage of life as you've seen it.
It's really important. As you can tell from my white hair, I've reached a stage of life where, young college graduates will call up and say, can I have an informational interview with you? And I love these conversations because they know what a job is, but what's a career? What is a career? And there's an idealism there because they want a career, they want to make an income, they want to be independent, but they want to do something that makes a difference. Get calls from people who are 60-something. It is the exact same conversation. It's about having purpose, having meaning. Yes, I still, need to be earning an income. And the only difference between like the 20-something and the 60-something is that to a 20-something, time is infinity. And to a 60-something, you're more aware that time is short, so you have to make a difference now.
So you mentioned 20 and 60-year-olds. One of the things you've written a fair bit about, and we've talked about, is this kind of intergenerational, it can be conflict, or it can actually be a really powerful kind of collegial, collaborative, energizing interaction. We have all heard and probably many of us have had directed at us directly, like "Okay, Boomer," right? You know,
Right, yeah.
That's not a terribly constructive way to start a conversation, probably. But just talk a little bit about your experience across generations and the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, I think it's one of these, it's like a knee-jerk response. There's a lot of consultants and I've read these articles where they're undermining the productivity in your company and your organization or all these generations, and they're fighting with each other. But when you step back and you look at all the surveys, and people have done the meta-analysis where they look at a number of surveys, and what it shows is how much the generation share values, not in conflict. They want to be part of a team. They want respect. They want to have a sense that their contributions are valued. And the differences are exciting. The differences are part of what brings diversity. I mean, I was shaped by the Vietnam War. I work with people for whom the Iraq War is in the history books. So we're bringing different experiences. It's different society. There are different pressures. But that's part of bringing diversity into an organization and having those conversations. And this isn't just kumbaya. There's a number of really good studies looking at what are the most productive teams in an organization. And the most productive teams in an organization are the multi-generational teams. And if you think about it for 2 seconds, that makes sense because you're each bringing something to the table. There was a study by a number of economists at the Max Planck Institute for Aging, and they've got access to a Mercedes-Benz truck factory. And part of their research was the multi-generational team is the most productive team. And part of it had to do with the younger people were running around a lot faster. The older ones were kind of like, we've kind of seen this. And together, they solved a lot of problems. And the experienced worker tended to they made more mistakes, but smaller mistakes. And so I think it's this notion of, teams, multi-generational, tapping into what each has to offer. It's much more of an exciting way to think about the world.
Yeah, and you've had a couple of experiences recently that we've talked about where adapting the workplace to different generations can be super powerful. Maybe you want to share, I just remember you talking about how workplaces that have a predominance of different generations but a respect for each adapt. So maybe one of those stories, I just thought it was super powerful how you shared that.
Well, I think respect is actually, really one of the keys. And one of the examples is the Mercedes-Benz factory, which is so strong. But it also, part of this is fighting against the notion that as you get older, you're less productive. And there's another story, because the world is not a car factory. I do recognize this. But there was, BMW did a famous experiment. There's a very, very good Harvard Business Review article that sort of summarizes it. And it's about the changes that they made to the production line to take into account that they were having more older workers. Germany has an older population on average than the US. Right. And I don't know what a BMW is, but it's a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And what they found is the investments that they made was about $50,000 to $75,000. And it was sort of changing the heights of chairs, having yoga mats, taking certain breaks for meditation, which things that they realized is good for everybody. Right. And so they put that throughout all their plants, because why do you want to hurt the back of a young person?
Right. Let alone making an old person not productive in that context,
exactly.
Right? So,
yeah.
And I think it's those kind of things, right, that are beneficial mutually that people sometimes lose sight of, right? That that's something, you don't just put something in place solely for the benefit of one demographic. You can oftentimes have benefits across multiple demographics, and we've certainly seen that here with certain courses that we've developed for one demographic, and we see it translates beautifully across to other demographics, sometimes to our surprise.
Right, and you also have to look at the data. So there's this theme you probably heard, or meme, about, the millennials, they're not saving. Well, they're saving a lot more than the boomers did at the same age. So you hear these stereotypes, they get repeated all the time, and they gain a life of their own. But if you, there was this experiment, so there was a global design firm outside of Boston, suburb of Boston that I visited, and they were doing a thing about technology training, and it was multi-generational. And let's say there were 100 people in the room, 95 did well. been one or two, not so well, but there was like one or two older people who really struggled. People did not remember all the ones who had actually been fine. What they remembered, because it confirmed their stereotype, was the one or two that were having trouble. And they didn't actually think about the one or two younger people that were also having trouble. So stereotypes are pernicious, and they can be reinforced.
So to the stereotype point, Chris, one stereotype that I think exists out there is that you can't make a major shift in your career. And you know, I think you're a living example that can happen, and that's part of what I think very much kind of feeds the ethos of what we do here, is that, you know, at any stage in life you can make a major shift. So if you don't mind sharing maybe a little bit of your background and a pretty dramatic shift that you made at a pretty important time in your life that brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, so when I graduated college, like a lot of people, young people didn't know what I wanted to do. So I joined the Merchant Marine and became a member of the Seafarers International Union. And for the next 4 years, on and off. At that time, the idea was you would go to sea for 6 months and then be 6 months off, because the maritime industry was going through a hard time, so that everybody get a job. And my first job was as a wiper, 7 months, Europe, Persian Gulf run. Wiper's a very good description. It is, you clean the engine room and you clean the other seamen's bathrooms. And then I just loved it. So I passed my Coast Guard exam to become a fireman or water tender, and then I became what's called an engine utility. So you carry the torch for the engineers, and the welding gear for the engineers, who then would do the welding or the burning. And got through the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal. It was really quite an adventure, but it wasn't a life for me. So I took my savings and went with a couple of friends, and we went to the London School of Economics for a year, got my master's degree. Was kind of thinking maybe might want to be an academic. Decided I didn't want to be an academic. Decided I wanted to be a journalist. Had never done any journalism. And so it took me a year in New York, pounding the pavement. And I just want to say he was the editor of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Chase. And I was 6 months and reaching that point of despair. And he sat me down in his office and says, I don't have a job for you, but tell me what you want to do. And we talked for about an hour, and I walked out, and I had another 6 months worth of energy after that conversation. So whenever someone's coming to you and they're a young person and they're despairing, take the time to talk to them, because you have no idea what that effect or impact could be on their life.
Well, and I think that gets to this kind of concept of intergenerational respect, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you not only respected but embraced the conversation, right? And it sounds like he more than gave you advice; he really empowered you. Is what he did. He said, he gave you the energy to stay energized for 6 more months and kind of continue the journey, which has led you to where you are today.
Right. And I love journalism.
Yeah. And so maybe just one thing, and then we can shift a little bit. But so talk about how your role as journalist and being a journalist has evolved so that you're as happy doing it today as it sounds like you were after you got through that 6 months.
Yeah. Well, I do love it, because journalism is sort of one of the last refuge for the curious. If you're curious about something, you want to know about something, if you can form a question, and you can convince your editors to do something with it, you go out and you talk to people. I mean, this whole field about rethinking, reimagining what aging means, and rethinking, reimagining retirement was something, no one handed that to me, or no one said, go do this. I was interested in it. And you go out and do it. So what I built a career is where I have a foundation in public radio, but then I also write books, and then I write for other publications. Most of it is on rethinking, reimagining the second half of life. And I love it. And I interview people, I talk to people, just like what everyone here is doing, who's sort of like taking a step back, thinking about what comes next. And what's so interesting is I talk to people, I go, oh, I could do that. Oh, I love that. That is a great idea. And then about 3 days later, I'll be thinking about, I really love what I do. I think I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson, right? That it's not to grasp everything that comes along, but to be attentive to what comes along and decide if that can help to make redirect, right? But to do it with some reflection and some time and some thinking, so you're not just jumping from one thing to another.
Right, and the thing that has really struck me is never underestimate how creative people are. Yeah. It's not always necessarily easy. That's the one I'm not saying, but it is. People are immensely creative, and we underestimate what it is that people can do.
Right. So maybe shifting a little bit, you've had an opportunity for a couple of days here to kind of witness the Inspired Leadership Initiative in action. Just any kind of thoughts or reactions as to, this is one of many different ways for people to kind of rethink their direction or rethink who they want to be. Your thoughts and reflections after a couple of days?
So a couple of things. I mean, I've had a wonderful experience, and I really have, and I'm not just saying that. But one of the things, I attended a couple of classes, and I saw the positive intergenerational interaction at work. And was one of the classes was philosophy of work. And there was about Thomas Aquinas. That was really interesting. But then there was a more modern thing. And it was about how work is not just an income, but people who are unemployed, their health worsens, they have more depression. But work is about connection. It's about being connected to society. Work is a community. And then the professor had students write on the board their thoughts about work. And then, we're having this conversation, and then one of the fellows, says, hey, you don't have compensation on this board. And what it did is the whole everyone turned, and that became one conversation. And then another fellow said, well, I want to describe to you my career and how my career evolved. And that sparked a new conversation. So you saw this intergenerational conversation going on, which is what I really loved. And I think that is incredibly important. The other thing is that has really struck me is one of the hardest things to do when you're rethinking what is it that I want to do is separating your job from your skills, right? Because I identify, I'm a journalist. Right. That's how I identify. Right. I don't say that I'm a communicator, I'm a storyteller. I say I'm a journalist, and we all do that. And so one of the things that programs like this do is I think it's not that you had a great career, it's good, but now you're going to do something else. Well, but what is it? And what are my skills? What are my abilities? What is it that's going to challenge me in the next stage of life? And you mentioned purpose. And I think purpose goes to the top of that list. Right. And it may be purposes, because some of us come up with one purpose, other people have multiple purposes. But it's having that ability to be with people that are in similar straits, having conversations. And what I'd love to see is this institutionalized everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's really the mission of programs like ours, is to be a little bit at the bulwark of transforming higher education institutions from being kind of the province of 18 to 30-year-olds to being the province of people throughout their life, right? And embracing this intergenerational element, because a lot of programs that kind of proceeded in this space, like executive education programs that are wonderful, but you're mostly surrounded by your peers in terms of age and stage, and you lose that intergenerational element. And I can tell you, the story that you gave are stories that faculty tell us and fellows tell us with regularity, that it's just magical when a fellow just brings in a perspective that's different, doesn't dominate, but actually just kind of sparks a new line of conversation that wouldn't have otherwise happened, right? And that's the beauty that can happen in the context of an intergenerational discussion. So in the few minutes we have for our discussion, any questions for me before we turn to questions from the audience?
Well, so I feel that this is in the vanguard of a revolution, right? And you have this program, but how do you spread it so that, community colleges, public universities, land-grant universities, that this ability to take some time, it may not be as long a period of time, but it takes some time. So how can you get your blueprint out there?
Well, the way I think about that, Chris, is it's kind of the responsibility of institutions like a Notre Dame or the other institutions that are in this space that have the resources to be able to develop something like this, to be at the vanguard and do the kind of prototyping that you do to get something like this to work, but then at the same time to be very conscious of bringing this to a much broader demography, as you say. And so what we've done actually is formed a formal coalition between those of us that are in this space to work to bring this to other institutions, because a lot of the kind of startup cost is experimentation that other institutions don't need to go through if they can benefit from the learnings that we've had as we've launched this program and as the other institutions have launched their programs. And also just thinking about different modes of delivery that are going to work, right? Our program, we're blessed, right? I look out at this room and we have people from across the globe, and most people moved here to spend the year. That's not possible for everybody, right? I'll use as an example my father-in-law, right? When I explained this program to him, he's a former state trooper, and he said, it would be so wonderful if our local community college has this. I got an early retirement program, and I would love to do this. But, you know, it's just not something, you know, both culturally and everything else that I'm going to do by moving to a different location. So that is the mission that we have. And the great thing is we've gone from 3 institutions in this space to, we'll have 9 starting next year. So we're beginning to get a global footprint. And we have a consortium that has 60 institutions, and 15 of those are land grant and community colleges. So helping them to do that. So hopefully 10 years from now, the kind of choices that undergrads have in terms of, I can pick my local community college, my local state college, I can pick a national university, a smaller university, a larger, that same spectrum of opportunities will be available to people that are looking, you know, have kind of completed their, what I'll call traditional career, right, and are looking to make a meaningful pivot to do something else.
And then, so the first time we talked, I think the program had started, but it was at the very, very early stages of it. We're now in your 4th cohort, right?
Yep.
So, you know, for the people in the audience listening who aren't going to the Inspired, you know, here, what is the thing that you've really learned about what really makes a difference in sort of thinking about what comes next?
Yeah, I would say what we've learned, 2 things, right? One, I'll start with kind of that having different programs that have different areas of focus is really important, because different individuals at this stage in life are looking for different things. So the programs that exist today do have different focus. Our focus is really centered around this whole discernment process, right? Helping people to, first of all, kind of broaden and discover what's out there. Because all of us, right? You've been a journalist, I'm a recovering business person. You get very focused on what you did before, and you know that world really well. You don't know the broader world, right? So exposing people to that through introducing them to faculty across the spectrum of different disciplines, encouraging them to engage with students and others, and importantly, creating a diverse cohort of people that come from different backgrounds. Because my hope is that each of our cohorts have learned as much from each other as they learn from what we do from a programmatic perspective. And then the thing is to put into place something that allows for a really nice mix of both kind of individual growth and collective growth, because you don't get an opportunity to be surrounded by 19 to 29 others that are going through the same process and are thinking about the same sorts of things and get comfortable with each other. So it's creating an environment that's conducive to community, not just amongst the fellows, but the fellows with the faculty, and importantly across generations. And what I love, and I was just in meeting with a student in the Student Center before this, and there's always 2 or 3 of our fellows in there, you know, doing a small group project with other fellows, with other students, doing things like that. You create that kind of environment so that people leave with a direction. And that's the last thing I'll say. And it's not necessarily they know exactly what their you know, if we give people a destination, that might work for 2 to 3 years. If you give people a great compass so that they can then navigate for the rest of their lives, then I think we've achieved what we want to achieve. So a little bit of it is we've shifted from saying, we're going to help you figure out what you want to do, to we're going to hopefully give you the tools and kind of a direction and who you want to be. And then you can use that tool for the rest of your life. If we're to do that, so we're successful.
And what about you? I mean, I can't imagine, say, 2, 3 years before you retired, that you were sitting around saying, well, I'm going to start the Inspired Leadership Institute.
Yeah. No, I think that would have been like number 200 on the top 100 list of things I thought I was going to do. But you know what my friends tell me is it only took me 35 years to figure out what I'm really passionate about, which is a wonderful compliment from them around, in a sense from them that I really am passionate about this. And I think it really is a testament to the fact that at the provost of the university at the time, Tom Burrish, literally looked at me and said, I thought once we kind of got this started, he would say, you know, would you be an advisor? And he looked at me and said, you know, you're super passionate about this. You're willing to learn. You're willing to engage with our faculty. You're willing to engage with others. I think you'd be the right person to do this. And now I'm just I feel super blessed and super privileged to have this opportunity, and hopefully I also realize I don't have many of the answers, probably very few of the answers, but what I've developed is a good ability to be curious and ask the right questions of the experts that exist around this campus. And there's a deep well of people, some of whom you've met, our fellows have met a lot of them, that are super intrigued by this whole idea of, wow, we can make this university into a place that's a super rich and deep well for these people that are coming in that are a different demographic. And it took a little bit, right, for them first year and the wonderful team I have assembled here will tell you, this 64-year-old female is going to be joining your class. Oh, really? You can. But now it's they're like, we get incoming requests from faculty saying, can we have one of your fellows? Because they bring a richness to the class that we don't have otherwise.
And don't you think that you mentioned the word curious?
Yeah.
We have so many stereotypes. It's not about age, it's about being curious. And most people are curious.
Yeah.
It's being given the opportunity to exercise that curiosity.
Yeah. And I think the whole thing of curiosity is, I think it actually creates curiosity. When you're sitting in a classroom and you look across the classroom and there's somebody who looks like, in the case of our students, their parent or grandparent, there's a curiosity of, what are they learning here? What are they hearing? Let me engage with them. Let me find out what they're doing. And then it creates a natural sharing. And it's in the spirit of what we call accompaniment. It's not hierarchical. It's not somebody of our generation looking at that student and saying, I have the answers, I'm going to share the answers with you. It's, let's engage in a conversation because I can learn from you and you can learn from me. And if you can foster that kind of an environment, as you said was fostered in the class, right? The fellows in the class didn't give answers. They just kind of put questions or things forward and created a great conversation, which is super powerful. So it's wonderful. Well, should we open it up to questions?
Some questions?
Yeah. We'll take them live from the audience here, and then others that come in, they'll bring up to us. So just raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll bring the mic to you. If not, I'm sure we can continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Chris, thanks for coming. In that spirit of a compass instead of a destination, based on what you've been doing, where's your compass pointing you next?
So the compass pointing me next. So I continue to write about this rethinking, reimagining aging. A lot of it, I think, is going to be more focused on, people who have been living on a low and unstable income and creating circumstances. And I'm going to be writing another book, and it's at the very, very early stage on the economics of immigration, small topic. But it's really engaging me. So, and that is probably going to take me another couple years.
Yeah, Chris, thank you very much. So what have you found as you've written from a financial perspective, kind of most surprising to you on money within a family as people age, right? So, or is there anything surprising just on how people deal with finances and we are living longer, so frankly, you need more money to live longer and all the factors that cost money to live.
So there are three things that surprised me. So one is, there's a lot of commentary in the personal finance press about don't be giving money to your children. Now, the fact of the matter is you're going to give money to your children, but children are also giving money to their parents. And this has been since time immemorial, and it's not a bad thing. This is what families do. So I think I now have a sense that there's too much negativity approach toward helping out your children as they get older, because the fact of the matter is they're going to help you out as you get older. And this is the deal with families, extended families, however you define family. The other thing that has struck me is, there's this message out there. Now, be very clear, saving early does make a difference, very important. But the notion out there that, you're the partner, you have kids are really expensive. They just are. you're going to buy a house, you got your career. The fact that you're going to save 20% of your income year in, year out, most people aren't going to be able to do it. But when the kids are launched and you still have another 10, 15 years to work, all of a sudden saving 20% of your income is perfectly reasonable. It can make a lot of sense, and it can transform your underlying finances. And I think the third thing is just how powerful even earning a slim part-time income can be in terms of shoring up household balance sheets. We can't all rely on it because, as we're all aware of, health is a fragile thing and things cannot go your way. But if you can, even if all your earnings is slim income, it makes an enormous difference. It's actually much more powerful toward the end of your life, toward the end of your working life, than saving. So those are three things that have really stood out to me. And I guess I'm going to do four. I'll give you a fourth one. The fourth one is to recognize how important our social insurance system is to our living standards. The Social Security and Medicare really do make a difference. And the social insurance system is important. It needs to be supported. It needs to be expanded because in the end, for many people, that is their retirement savings.
Again, thank you very much for sharing. As individuals who are in this stage of retiring, they generally come out of working very hard, maybe 60, 70 hours. And so as they look at their encore career, from the individuals that you've talked with, are they better balancing in terms of the second careers, if you will, or how are they working to consider that as part of the next stage?
I think that's a core part of it. That you know, there's a sense of I've did that, done that, and not only do I want to work 60, 70 hours a week, but actually don't want to be working those kind of hours for 40 hours pay at the same time. So, I mean, I think it really is a rebellion. It's really, for a lot of people, it's creating a portfolio. And, you know, depending on your circumstances, you want some time with grandchildren, you have grandchildren, or time with your children and your friends. And you have some things, some passions that you want to pursue. You like to bike, or you like to travel, whatever that may be. But then you want to be giving back. But you also want to have your skills and your knowledge. See, here's one of the things about, and we use the word retirement because we don't have another word for it. I came up with I adapted the word unretirement. And you mentioned encore. I mean, there are all kinds of words that we toss out there. But one way of thinking about it, you developed all this skills, all this knowledge, all this experience. And the notion that you then walk away from that forever, you don't tap into that again. I think for most people, that is not good because we all want to be useful. That's part of being human. We want to be helpful. We want to be useful. So we want to continue to tap into our knowledge, skills, and experience, but in a different setting, doing something different, something that is more directly giving back, that has more purpose attached to it. And we don't want to be doing that. Now, there's always an exception to this. I know some people who have started these incredible nonprofits in their 60s and 70s, and it's all absorbing, and you know, it's admirable. But I think for most people, the way that I would think about it is as a portfolio of activities, of which one of them, and an important one, is your work.
Yeah, I would just add maybe just a couple little things on that. One is the adaptivity of that skill set and experience and knowledge, right? I think that's one thing people underestimate, right? We've certainly seen that with the fellows that have emerged from the program and the kinds of things that they're doing that leverage all of that, but don't appear on their face to be related to that. The other thing for more visual thinkers like me, you talk about portfolio being and I get that from being a former finance person, but I think of it as a mosaic, right? And that central tile of the core career is so big at a certain stage, but kind of shifting that and making room for some new tiles is oftentimes what at least our experience has been people do in these later stages in life. So I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll have to conclude.
Oh, I had more anecdotes.
All right, thank you, Chris, and it's such an honor to, listen to you. world of experiences, your particular, your wide and everything, the wisdom and everything. But for me, though, if you imagine you were part of us, and from what you know about this program, and specifically from what you heard from me, I was so honored that you were sitting with our table and listening to me babbling most of the time. And what
You're not babbling, you make complete sense.
what you would give us an advice to people like us, what we would do if you were us, taking the best time, spending the 10 months in here to get the most beneficial. After we leave, it could be something different than we come here, or making a difference in our life, and possibly differences in people's life that we could contribute a little bit. What your advice, if you could give it me specifically, or give it everyone else, yes, generally.
Okay, so I'm going to assume you're going to take full advantage of this program. The issue is when you leave, after this period of time, you're part now of a community, and you also have knowledge. So it would be, and also for many of you, you'll come up with something to do, but then you're going to come up with something else to do, and then you'll make another pivot. So it's tapping into the resources of the community, but also each of you have your own communities. And now you've learned something about whether you're talking to someone who's 25 years old or someone's 45 years old, you now have a stock of knowledge that can be really helpful, really useful for people thinking through a transition. Because, you know, we only get one pass in this life, and it is relatively short. And so you know people who are going to want to make a change, or whatever stage of life they're at. You now have some knowledge that you can pass on. You have your own knowledge, your own experience, but I think you also have some structures, some insights that you've gained. So it's like you're part now of a community. You're a community of the fellows, and then within your own communities, you now have something additional to what you already could offer. You now have some additional knowledge to offer to your networks, your friends, your colleagues, the people that you love and the people you care about.
Well, I hate to bring this to a close. As we talked about before, the time
keep-
just
yeah.
vaporized. We could have gone on a lot longer. And I hope we have the opportunity to do over time. But thank you. A sincere thank you. And a thank you also to all of you that are here and our live stream guests. There will be one more installment of this for our live stream guests, and that will be on Thursday, February 23rd. It is what we call an exploration session. It's an opportunity for you to see kind of a behind-the-scenes look into what the Inspired Leadership Initiative is all about. You had an opportunity to do a live exploration session, but this is a nice virtual opportunity for you to dive in and see to what extent something like the Inspired Leadership Initiative can help you to create your inspired journey, which is what this whole series is all about. So I'll close by saying thank you once again to everybody, and we look forward to seeing you on February 23rd.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.